off, thanks everyone for joining from all over the place, it looks like. I really appreciate you all taking some time out of your busy days to come hang out with us. This is our bi-weekly Tuesday webinar, where we kind of go deep into a particular topic that either our customers or the community has asked around. In today's presentation, we have two folks from the Astronomer team, Benji and Josh, who will be going through how to use Airflow with Azure Data Factory. Just a couple of logistics notes to keep in mind before we get started is number one, the recording and all code samples and so on will be sent out afterwards. So you're covered on that. And then number two, please drop your questions in the QA section or the chat, and we'll get to them after the demo. That way, we'll give these two a chance to get through everything that they've put together. And then from there, we can spend the rest of the time on questions. With that said, I'll hand it off to Benji and Josh to introduce themselves, and we'll dive right in. Let me go off camera. It's all you guys.
Josh, you wanna
yeah, why not? Hi, everyone. I'm Josh. I'm an ecosystem engineer at Astronomer.
Hey, everyone. I'm Benji. I'm an enterprise platform architect here at Astronomer.
Cool. Benji, I'll start sharing my screen and we can kick off.
Sounds good. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about orchestrating ADF and Airflow, what these two are doing together. So let's talk real quick about what is ADF. We're going to assume everyone here has an understanding of what Airflow is. A lot of you have been using it for quite some time already, but not everyone here necessarily knows what Azure Data Factory is. So the real quick version is it's an orchestration tool for data pipelines, similar to Airflow, but it's specifically within the Azure realm, and it integrates with a lot of different data stores inside and outside of Azure. And we can see here on the chart where those data sources are, and that it powers a lot of the visualization and analysis tools in Azure. So we can hop to the next slide here. So what does it do specifically? It allows you to construct ETL and ELT processes code-free. So they have a nice drag and drop UI that you can use. And then within each of these drag and drop pieces, you can open them up and select data sources, or you can use them as building blocks for transform operations on data sets like filters. You can do aggregations, you can do joins. It's fairly robust in the kinds of functions that you can apply to the data sets. Kind of as they're on their way to the other storage destinations. And then you can see here that there's also more than 90 built-in connectors that you can use, and those go to other data stores, or you can even just do REST endpoints to get data from it, and we'll go deeper into that in a little bit. So next slide, please, Josh. So why add Airflow? The simple reason to add Airflow to this is you can orchestrate your ADF pipelines with it. And there's a lot of use cases. For example, you could have multiple pipelines across multiple teams, and you want to orchestrate those pipelines that may have dependencies and different teams working on them. And maybe those teams don't have the greatest communication skills or don't want to coordinate with each other to manually set off pipelines that have dependencies. So we can leverage Airflow instead to monitor these different pipelines and see when those dependencies are met and kick them off at those points in time. So it's orchestrating the orchestrator. So if we don't have any questions, okay, I can give everyone a minute to see if we have any questions just about ADF and Airflow together. Otherwise, we can start on the next step.
Cool. Thanks for the intro, Benji. So I will kick it over to what these pipelines are doing. So as Benji alluded to, let's say we have a scenario in which kind of an enterprise organization, and there is one team, maybe a large team, small team, that is responsible for building out a data lake for the whole organization. So they interface with other APIs or ingest flat files, etc. They build out a data lake for then other kind of downstream or organizational teams to use that data. Hence the centralization of a data lake. But they're in charge of all of that, and they're running all of their extract and loads in Azure and doing it via Data Factory. Meanwhile, there is another team that wants to ingest some data from that, right? They do the same thing. They are reading things from the data lake or data that's staged for them by the upstream kind of data lake team. And they're also using Azure Data Factory as well. What could happen there is perhaps that both of those pipelines or even those data factories aren't accessible by either teams for a variety of reasons. So it could be a little difficult to either schedule and execute both of those pipelines together. You could do some things where you're looking at different triggers or having a master data pipeline, that kind of thing, and that's where Airflow comes in. So you have the ability to really orchestrate multiple pipelines that maybe for this demonstration, you can see they are in the same data factory, but by all means, they could be in completely different data factories, different subscriptions, tenants, etc. And as long as you can create a connection via Airflow to them, you can orchestrate them as you see fit in kind of a overarching master orchestration. So to kind of dive into those two pipelines that we have for this demo, the data set that we're going to pull in, as pretending we're the extract team, is some currency exchange rates for the US dollar and the euro. We extract that from an API. That's an open source exchange rate API, excuse me. Persist that to a data lake, which is in Azure Blob Storage. Then move that data from Azure Blob Storage into Azure SQL Database via store procedure here. And then once that data is successfully moved into the Azure database, we will delete the landed files to keep everything clean. The second pipeline is much simpler, at least for demonstration purposes. Let's say the team that's consuming this exchange rate data wants to make sure that what is pulled is correct. It's a valid currency code. They wrote a store procedure, which does such a thing. They have reference data that has all the different 160 or so different currencies, checks the data that was extracted for them is valid. And then if those data quality checks pass, then let's load a daily aggregate table and maybe have some type 2 dimensional logic where we kind of keep a history and log what data rows are the most recent or active, if you will. So how are we going to do that in Airflow? Simplest bit, this is what an example pipeline would look like. You have some certain tasks that execute the extract data pipeline, as well as one that does the more loading and data quality factory pipeline. These two here are actually task groups, so we can expand them both. Both of these task groups are the same approach in how we're taking this extract and running these pipelines. So first, we will set some kind of operational checkpoints and kind of gatekeeping around here with executing the pipelines. We want to make sure that we're not trying to execute a data factory pipeline that's already running. And you can imagine the different issues you have with multiple EL and other data processing pipelines running at the same time, right? So we have this a task to do that. We check to see if it is in fact running, and if it isn't, this is actually a short circuit operator. If it is running and not it could be a failed, canceled, success, making sure it's not actually active. If it is, we'll short circuit this entire pipeline and not actually run it. If it's good to go. We'll execute it and then use an Airflow sensor to poke at the status of the data pipeline and wait for it to be in success. Again, for the other pipeline, it's the same deal. It's just for a completely different pipeline. The beauty of this is you definitely get a higher level monitoring situation in Airflow, as most of you know. You can, of course, look at how things are doing from a execution per task perspective in Airflow. You can look at it from a daily perspective overall with all of your tasks running for that day, of course. And you can add some more metadata with what the stack is actually doing for those that may be on both of those teams and not necessarily they haven't created this pipeline, but they can view it. And now they know exactly what this is doing, of course. So let's go ahead and run it to make sure I'm not doing some hand wavy stuff. So we're going to clear the first task and all of its downstream tasks and let it run. So again, we're checking the pipeline status, making sure that it's not in a running mode, and then executing it. We've executed our pipeline, our first one. Let's check it out. Let's refresh. Cool. Running the extract daily exchange rates. Like it should be about 30 some seconds. Also, what's good about Airflow here is if this at all fails, there is no really custom logic that you have to build in. If the data factory fails, it will propagate up to Airflow, which is great. And then you can have some other notifications that we've had other webinars for. Just super useful. Great, so that part finished. And now we're doing the same for the data quality piece. And while that's running, let's check our data lake. So Azure Storage Explorer, we'll go to our data lake container. And let's pick the Euro, sure. It's all partitioned by day. Today is the 10th, still checking. And where do we see? Yeah, here's our latest one. So again, a data lake, we're keeping all files ingested. Obviously, I've run this a few times before, just to kind of point that out. It's persisting all the storage or all the data files in storage, as a good data lake should. And then, of course, now that extract pipeline is finished, the landing container is completely deleted, which makes it a clean ingest. Great. Okay, so data quality is finished. Looks like our checks completed. Let's just make sure, show everybody. Great. All righty. So in the database, in our Azure SQL database, let's see, we're loading some staging data. Let's see if we got it there. You can see times for the 10th. We're ingesting, again, the exchange rates for the US dollar and euro, and why not compare them to the yen and the Swiss franc. And then in our daily aggregate table, you can see, where's the 10th? We got the 10th and created just now. So everything works great. And just to make sure that, at least here's what we're doing with the kind of activating and deactivating records. We do have, our updates for activating and deactivating. So we have the latest version of each extract date per currency code. Cool. Okay. Viraj mentioned earlier that all the code's going to be sent out after the demo is over, right? What you could do is also use the Astronomer registry for this. So this entire pipeline, the corresponding Docker files, the requirements, you can see the actual code within the Astronomer registry, a graph for it, at least an expanded one, so you can see all of the tasks. What version of Airflow we've used, the requirements for the Azure Provider, of course, and you can go view it on GitHub if you want to as well, if that's easier for you. Also, you can download it, fork it, run it locally. Easy way to do that is with the Astronomer CLI, of course. But just to let everyone know, this is up on the registry if it's a good place for you to look at it. And I think that's all for me for now, I think. Kick it back over to Viraj and the crew for any questions. I know that was rather lickety split fast.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for going through that, Josh. I think we have a bunch of questions in the chat here. So we'd love to just, go through all of these to make sure we're getting through all the content here. Cool. So Akshay is asking, Anil is asking, can Airflow replace ADF completely? Josh, I think it's a good question for you to take.
Sure. I mean, the answer could be yes. It's always it also could be completely no. That depends on whatever your use cases are, right? Or Airflow is a tried and true orchestration tool. There are definitely more scenarios that you can think of probably where, hey, maybe you're an Azure shop. You've been using Microsoft for a while. You love working in Azure. Your ecosystem is Azure. Let's use ADF. If you want to do some more, it's also a built-in service too for Azure Data Factory, which can actually do and is built for doing some extract and transformations and things of that nature. But there's definitely a case for both. I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive though, as we're demonstrating here. You can definitely do all of your heavy logic in Azure Data Factory, and then Airflow just simply orchestrates all of that, gives you some operational checkpoints you can build in. Hey, if you love Python and you're really good at it, or you are a Python person, then Airflow is great. There's varying number of conditionals, I think, for that, but I would say not necessarily. And sure.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, right? It's all about what your use case is and what you're trying to do. If you have users that need to use something that's a little more drag and droppy, you probably can't just use drag and drop for totally with Airflow. But if there's a hybrid use case, you can use the two of them together really well. Cool. So another question around how exactly the mechanics of the DAG that you wrote, right, is how are you actually checking the status of the ADF pipeline?
Yeah. I'll just go back to share my screen. Why not?
Yeah, why don't you walk through the code on that? That'd be great.
Yeah. Cool. So how we're checking the status, we're using the Data Factory API. And we have this custom function that we're decorating as a task, where we effectively are querying the Data Factory for pipeline runs. For those that we're passing in a pipeline name, factory resource group, and then checking just for now, the last 7 days. Hey, what's the latest status that we've gotten? And returning that status. Of course, you could have a brand new pipeline and things haven't run yet, so there is no pipeline run, but the pipeline exists. We'll return some sort of good status that says go ahead and execute the pipeline. But later on, when I mentioned the short circuit operator, we'll check to see the return status from that function task in a list of good to go statuses.
Gotcha. And in that same note, right, how would you say, how's the authentication working there? How's Airflow actually talking to ADF there, or vice versa?
Yeah, so you can set that up in connection in Airflow. There is a built-in connection type for you. This shouldn't be anything crazy, and you can just insert your connection information here with the custom Azure Data Factory connection type.
And then, for other users that do also kind of export that connection through Vault or Secrets Manager of your choosing, we just kind of showed you the most straightforward way to get started. So I think question, probably one for Benji here is, can you talk a little bit more about what that data quality check is doing and how exactly that's working? What is it checking for, and how are you actually going in and performing that?
Sure. So as we mentioned before, there's a statement there already that it's a saved procedure. And so what that does is essentially just a SQL query that gets saved in the Azure side. And when it gets triggered, that SQL statement runs against the table. And what it's doing specifically is checking to make sure that all of the loaded currencies are in a list of like known accepted currencies. So basically that we're not getting any new currencies loaded that aren't on the list of ones that are verified. In this use case, it could be to make sure that the exchange rates that we're seeing are all valid. So this particular data quality case is concerned with the correctness of the data, but there's a lot of different data quality checks we can do also. I mean, if you want to get particularly nitty gritty about it, we could talk about how these things could be set up with SLAs also, and how we could add that to monitoring tasks to make sure that the data is there on time. But in particular, this data quality check is an accuracy check. And of course, we have to wait for the data to be loaded, at least to a staging data table before we can do that check. And then as the check gets completed and it passes, it gets loaded into the actual main database. And then we can be certain that all the data in that final destination is good quality data.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really important piece there, right? That when you actually go in and orchestrate orchestrators, you want to make sure that the data you're getting back is correct. Cool. Another question from Steve here is, this was a demo of ADF executing Airflow pipelines. Do you think you could go the other direction and show Airflow executing ADF pipelines? Oh, sorry. This was ADF executing Airflow pipelines. Do you think Airflow could execute ADF pipelines?
Other way around. ADF executing Airflow pipelines.
Yeah. I only messed it up 3 times. So you get what I was saying.
Yeah. And too many A's.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. They can definitely be, like I said, they're not mutually exclusive. And if you do have great use cases to have both, then there's no reason that you could easily execute an Airflow DAG or set of DAGs through the API. I mean, that experimental API, which is now part of the stable piece, has been around for quite some time. So definitely you could use an activity in Azure Data Factory to execute an Airflow DAG that way.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that would be a really cool use case that maybe if someone whoever asked that question wants to collaborate on, we'd be kind of really interested in pushing that example into our registry as well. Showing the two-way relationship there. Cool. So let me just find the next question here. So Josh, you kind of mentioned this a little earlier, but can you use multiple ADF projects with a single instance of Airflow, or can a single DAG be hitting more than one ADF pipeline, or is it kind of a one-to-one relationship?
Oh, yeah, you can definitely hit multiple data factories. Let's put it that way. For the demo purposes, we were just leaving it in the same data factory, but definitely as part of the connection, you could have separate connections for each data factory, let's say. And with all those operator sensors and that function, you're passing in what the resource group name is, the factory name, and the pipeline if it matters. So yes, they don't necessarily need to be, those pipelines don't need to be in the same factory. They can 100% be separate factories.
Gotcha. And on that note, right, a question from Devon is, did you see an easy way to control resources on the ADF side? It sounds like he's a pretty experienced Airflow user, and he's used to using Kubernetes Executor to control the resources Airflow uses. Can you control ADF resources with, when you're orchestrating your job in ADF with Airflow, can you control resources from there?
I wouldn't say I'm a data factory expert, but it being a fully managed service, I wouldn't necessarily think that you would need to. I didn't see it. There was nowhere where I set up the pipeline that I needed to say how much memory, CPU, number of, let's say, an equivalent worker when setting up those pipelines. It was basically just create your pipeline and trigger it.
Gotcha. Very cool.
These Airflow ADF operators, they don't have any anywhere to set any of those resource capabilities either, right?
Right.
Okay.
looks like that's just functionality missing from the ADF API, right? Because all the operators are doing is wrapping that API.
Mhm.
Cool. What about templating, right? So, one of the great parts about Airflow is you can use Jinja templating and macros to kind of figure out things at runtime for your workloads. You do a similar thing for a use case like this, maybe passing the date or something as part of your parameters.
Sure, and it can go both ways. You could certainly parameterize your Azure Data Factory pipeline or pieces of it, pass that along as a pipeline parameter from when Airflow triggers it. And that could all be built. These operators and sensors are custom because none exist at the moment. So yeah, certainly you could pass in a parameter when triggering the Azure Data Factory. And talking about the use case going the other direction, you could definitely send off an object when triggering the DAG. That's a classic DAG run conf object. So you can definitely do both.
Awesome. So, one other thing that we've heard a lot around is just how your data pipelines play into your source control strategy. Cyril is asking, ADF has a great Git integration where you can develop different branches in ADF from your Git repo. How specific can I make my Airflow to ADF connection, right? Can I connect to any of the factories out there? Does Airflow play nicely into this version control?
Yeah. So you could, Git syncing Airflow DAGs is a very common use case. So I could imagine everything living, maybe it could be separate repositories or the same one, and being able to Git sync your DAG code to your Airflow environment and linking that up is perfectly common and done a lot, for sure.
Yeah. The other thing that we've seen a lot about is like, how does your actual CI system play with that, right? So when you make a change, how does that change ultimately get deployed? You can do some really nice things with your Airflow environments, your ADF environments, and your CI/CD system, especially if you're all in Azure and you're using Azure DevOps. It'll play nicely to a lot of those patterns.
You talk a little bit about that on the weekly demos.
Yeah.
If anyone hasn't joined any of those,
yeah,
there's a little piece about the Raja walkthrough, CI integration, and all the cool nifty tools that you can use easily with Astronomer.
So another question from Brevin here is, we used ADF for the orchestration piece there. Can I extend that to other orchestrators, i.e. like Databricks just launched a new orchestration service? Could I apply the same patterns into the Databricks orchestration service that I did here?
Sure, I imagine they have. I haven't looked at it. I've seen it. Well, I've seen the news that there is one. If there's an API, you could certainly wrap it in a function or build out a repeatable abstraction as an operator in Airflow and kick off all of your Databricks orchestration. We've seen it done with Dataflow or just Apache Beam itself. So yes, certainly. And that's kind of the classic use of Airflow is orchestrating external services. Not necessarily doing everything heavy in Airflow, but let whatever tool you want to use, it's Airflow is provider agnostic, right? So any tool that you want to use and has Python API, you can do it in Airflow.
Yeah. So this question's come up like 3 times so far, and I think it's a pretty good one to do right before our last call. Is how do you get Airflow running in the Azure ecosystem? Is that something that Astronomer can help with?
100%. I don't know if Benji wants to take that one, but yes.
Sure. I mean, we can certainly do deployments on Azure and set up your whole managed or self-managed service there. As long as it runs Kubernetes, I think we can put Astronomer there.
Yeah.
Confirm that's the case.
Yeah. What you saw is Astronomer running on Azure. We have a couple of really easy ways to get started from 0 to production grade Airflow right out of the box. And the nice part is we're open source friendly. So all of the things you're doing with Airflow previously, or any of the examples that you saw today, they can plug right in here really easily.
It's only Tuesday, Viraj.
It's only Tuesday. I don't know how to make it through the rest of the week. Cool. Another good question, Devon, here is the way that you've set this up right now. Is it a one-way street or two-way street, right? So if you mark the task as failed in Airflow, will that go in and fail the task in ADF, or is that still room for further integration that we need to explore?
As those operators are written now for the demo, no, but it's a very simple, there's a built-in operator function for it. You can, hey, when you kill this task, it propagates things. So as long as it's part of the operators and sensors are really abstractions on top of a hook, which is all where your integration man, Viraj, it's contagious. Yeah, where all your interaction is happening and integration. So as long as that functionality is there and you have some sort of mechanism to, like, let's say, cancel the run, yes, it's part. I think there's a cancel pipeline run function already in that Azure Data Factory hook in Airflow. And it's just a matter of, hey, when you kill this task, perform that function. So yes.
Cool.
So speaking of, may I?
Go ahead.
Speaking of custom stuff, I know everyone has a lot of experience with Airflow and such. What would be really cool if you want to do it, is through the registry, other than seeing this gorgeous DAG catalog that's here. If you have some really amazing pipelines and DAGs you want to show off and you want to get them on the registry, you can simply go to our registry, click on this publish button, and give us a link to your GitHub repo, email little info about it. We're happy to talk to you and get it out on the registry so that the whole Airflow community can see all of these other example DAGs, and now so that we're not pouring over Stack Overflow and GitHub discussions and Airflow Slack, etc. But feel free, more than welcome. Always taking submissions. That was my shameless plug. Back to you, Viraj.
Nothing shameless about it. We want to collaborate with the community on DAGs. We want to make sure that it's easy for anybody to get started and easy for anybody to get an actual production use case specific workload going. So that's what we're here for, right? So please submit your DAGs to us. We'd be happy to evangelize them to the rest of the community. So let's see here. Carlos is asking for a solution diagram here. Carlos, I'm going to drop my email in the chat here. We can chat about that offline. We can definitely get you what you need in terms of diagram, as well as some easy ways to get started. Cool. I'm going to look through one more time for questions. I don't think we missed any here, but if there's anybody who has any last minute questions here before we jump off, please drop them in the chat now, and we'll give that about a minute or two before saying goodbye here. What version of Airflow do you use here? Josh, you want to answer that?
Yeah, it was Airflow 2.1.
I think that example you showed should work with any 2.0 branch, right? Because it's just using the Azure Provider.
Yes, and not using one that requires 2.1 with the latest releases.
Gotcha. Let's see here, one more time here. Plans to move to 2. Yep, so that was running Airflow 2, Eugene. If that's something you need help with, I'll drop my email again in the chat here, and we can definitely reach out and help get started. All right, everyone. Well, I think that's all the content we have for today. Oh, sorry, there's one more question from LinkedIn here. Sorry, let me answer that one. How do you actually go and make sure your changes between ADF and Airflow are synced up as you kind of get more and more users using your service?
I mean, that might go back to the GitHub syncing, the Git syncing question. Especially if everything's in one place for your team, you have, regardless of what they are, Git Syncing is a good choice, or any other CI tool that you have. You can definitely put both in the same CI tool and have them sync up across the board.
Yeah, definitely want to rope that into your source control. Alrighty, I think now we're that was the last question here. So from all of us at Astronomer, thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for your time. We'll send out the slides as well as the sample code and the recording right after. And look forward to you all joining us in the next at the next webinar, where we'll go in deeper into another Airflow topic. Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.